Back when I was in high school, I used to love gym classes. I was not a bad student, but I really wasn't the smartest either, and I didn't particularly enjoy most classes. Gym class was a class where you didn't really have to know much. You could just be physically active and play sports. For this one gym class, I don't recall which one it was. I was a sophomore in high school. I was in this class with one of my best friends, named Adam. We would talk and hang out all the time. At this particular time of the year, we would go outside sometimes for gym, as the weather was nice. It was the second period of the day, so it was still pretty early in the morning. One day during gym class, we went outside to the fields behind the school. There was a large area behind the school where all the sports fields were. Football, baseball, soccer, some practice fields, tennis, and beyond that was a large woods. We were out in one of the open practice fields, playing ultimate frisbee or something like that. I remember that, in the middle of this, a school lockdown ensued. The teacher blew his whistle and called everybody to the front of the field. There were probably 20 to 30 kids in the class, and just the teacher to look after us. He told us that the school was going into a lockdown, so we would be entering the school, going into the gym, and waiting there. Then he told everyone to get in line. From where Adam and I were, though, we realized it would be easy not to go in. We didn't want to go into the school and wait out a lockdown. Who knows how long that would take. Plus, it would be more dangerous to be in the school. Probably that was our thinking, really. We were just being immature kids, wanting to get out of class. So we decided to run off and wait out the lockdown outside. When it was over, we could then have a friend let us back into the school during passing time between classes. We obviously didn't think it out too much, and we also obviously weren't too worried about the actual lockdown. We had only had one other one prior to that in our high school careers, and I remember that it was for nothing major. Just a minor little thing. So anyway, we got the idea to leave and decided to do it. When everyone was walking back to the school, we went in the other direction, toward the woods. We were easily able to get away from the class without our teacher noticing. We ran along the side of the fields and then went into the woods a short way. The woods there were not huge, but there was a good amount of trees, and you could stay hidden pretty easily. We then texted one of our friends who was not in our class, but in another one. Adam asked him what the lockdown was for and told him that we were going to hang out outside until it was over. Our friend said that he didn't know. He just said that there was a lockdown, and that was it. He agreed that when it was over and when class was dismissed, he would let us in through a back door to the school. That's because all the doors were locked during the day, aside from the main front door, and there you had to go by someone. So Adam and I sat on the edge of a tree branch, just in the woods, and looked back at the school. We went on our phones and talked. I was feeling glad that we were not in the school during the lockdown. We were both wondering what it was for, though, and how long it would last. Neither of us could ditch school and go home or anything like that because we were both too young to drive. So we didn't have cars. We also didn't live close enough to the school to walk home, and with it being only second hour, we had to go back for our next class. About 10 minutes into being outside on our own, we heard a number of cars driving down the street in front of the school. That street was normally fairly quiet, as the school was not right on any kind of super busy road. We looked over, and even though it was really far away, we could see part of the street to the left of the school building, and then we could see all the fields right in front of us. I remember noticing about 5 police cars driving really fast down the street, headed for the school. That's when I actually got kind of nervous. I thought that maybe the lockdown was for something bad, and not just them being overly cautious for something minor like before. I guess I had just assumed that it wasn't really anything serious. We were texting back and forth with our other friend. He still knew nothing, though. After all the cop cars arrived, they went to the front of the school, so they were now out of our sight. Probably 1 or 2 minutes later, we saw something else. There was this man who emerged behind the school. I didn't notice if he left through a back door of the school or came around from the side of the building. I only really noticed him when he was already behind the school, but still really far away from us. Adam saw him as well at about the same time. We didn't recognize him. The man was walking, and then he picked up the pace and started jogging. He went through the sports practice fields where our gym class had been playing. Then he started jogging straight toward us. We ducked down, even though he most likely couldn't see us at all. I'm not sure why, but neither of us ran away. Instead, we hid. We both went behind a large tree that we were near in a small clearing. We got low to the ground and became quiet, so I couldn't see anymore. But then I heard footsteps approaching the woods. That's when I got really nervous. The man then entered the woods right in front of us. He walked to the right, to the other side of the tree, and then stopped. Adam and I literally held our breath. Then, after what felt like forever, but was probably 5 to 10 seconds, the man started walking through the woods past us. His footsteps then got farther and farther away. Adam and I both got up at once and began running back for the school. We didn't stop until we had made it all the way to the front. We saw police cars and a few officers. They seemed confused as to why we were outside, but we told them what had happened. The next thing we knew, we were waiting outside the school with a few officers and school staff. This went on for a while until we were told that it was safe to go back inside and that the lockdown was over. It turns out the man was a suspicious person who had been seen in the school. He fled after a staff member saw him, but nobody knew where he went. He left the school and ran into the woods. The cops found him a short time later after we told them where he went. He was only a few blocks away from the woods, in a neighborhood behind it. So, on one hand, Adam and I learned a valuable lesson, not to do dumb stuff like that, because it was terrifying. But on the other hand, we kind of helped the police catch the guy. Something really scary happened to me when I was in high school. It all started one day when I was a junior. Up to that point, it had seemed like a very normal school year. I was kept very busy as I was involved in sports, school activities, and had a lot of friends as well. This was in the first semester, and I played on the volleyball team, so we had practices or games on most days. My best friend Rachel and I had a class together during third period. Between every class, we had our lockers next to each other, and we would hang out by them with other people in our grade. So I remember that one day Rachel and I got to our class. Most of the hour went by like normal. But toward the end, there was suddenly an announcement for a lockdown. Everyone in the class got nervous and started wondering what it could be about. We followed the lockdown procedure. All the students had to move to the back of the classroom. The door was locked, the lights were turned off, and we were all told to be quiet. This went on for about 30 to 45 minutes. Then it was over. It was announced that it was safe to return to classes like normal. Obviously, the period was over by then, so we left the classroom and went into passing time. When I got back to my locker, I saw that there was a small, sticky note on it, which had not been there before. I looked at it, and written on it was a handwritten message that said, "I'll be waiting for you." I was very confused when I saw this. I didn't know what it meant or who it was from. I showed it to Rachel, who was just as confused as I was. We asked a few friends nearby, thinking maybe it was a joke, but nobody knew anything. I didn't connect it to the lockdown at all at that point, as it just wasn't on my mind. I was also wondering what the lockdown was for, and a lot of people were talking about it. Nobody seemed to know, though. The only thing I heard was someone say that someone else had said a guy was in the school. You know how rumors spread in high school. So I didn't know if this was true or not. Either way, it was safe now, as we were allowed to return to classes. The rest of the school day went on as normal. After school, I had volleyball practice, which didn't start right away because we had to wait to get into the gym. So I hung out at the school with my teammates. We then had practice, and it wasn't until around 6 p.m. that I was done for the day and could go home. So I left and started driving back. By then, the school was quiet, and it was getting dark outside. After I left the school, I noticed that a car pulled out onto the road behind me and started following me. At first, I didn't realize it was following me, but then it got really close. When I turned, it turned as well. This continued, and I started to feel uneasy about why it was following me so closely. I didn't recognize the car or know who might be driving it. I continued to drive home, which would take me almost 15 minutes. The more turns I made, the car was still there. I started getting worried and wondered what I should do. I couldn't tell who was driving. I could just barely see the figure of a person in the driver's seat. It was too far away and too dark to make out any details. When I got close to my neighborhood, the car was still there. It was literally just the two of us on the road before my street. I started driving around the block, and the car stayed behind me. I began turning randomly, and it followed every turn I made. That's when I took out my phone and called my dad because I was freaking out. He told me to keep driving and not stop, and that he was on his way. I stayed on the line with him while he asked where I was. He then drove out in his truck and got behind the car that was following me. At first, he honked, but the car didn't react and kept following me. It became a line of 3 cars driving through residential streets at night. My dad then drove right up behind the car and actually bumped it lightly with his truck. He honked again. The car then turned onto a different street, not the direction we were going, and sped away. We went back home, and my dad called the police. We told them everything that had happened. After things had settled down and I was back home, I started to connect everything. The lockdown, the note, and the car following me. I began to wonder if someone had been stalking me. I went on my Instagram account and realized that I had a bunch of message requests from a user. I hadn't noticed them before because they were in the request folder, which I never checked. This user had been sending me messages for days. At first, they were fairly normal. But eventually, he said that he was going to find me and come to my school. The next day, I showed the messages to my principal, and the police were called in. I told them everything, and they conducted an investigation. I remember that they eventually found the guy. It was a pretty crazy situation. I hadn't noticed anything at first because I had been so busy with everything. But I'm really glad that nothing worse ended up happening. When I was a senior in high school, I spent one of my classes during the first semester as a teacher's assistant for a history teacher in the school. It was a teacher whom I really liked and had in the past. I would help with any tasks that she needed me to do, which oftentimes meant grading papers. I would only have to grade the easy ones, assignments with definitive answers, so I didn't have to make judgment calls. It was easy work, but it still took a while. The classroom was at one far end of the school where things were a lot quieter. One day the teacher gave me a big stack of assignments to grade, and the class was going to the computer lab for the entire period. I was told that I could stay in the classroom and work if I wanted to. I chose to do so, as there was more space, it would be quieter, and I could also slack off more if I wanted. So they left, and it was just me alone in the classroom. I sat at a random desk and got to work grading assignments. Maybe 20 minutes into the class period, I heard a sound over the intercom. It was followed by an announcement that the school was being locked down, and this was not a drill. This was an interesting situation for me to be in, because I was all by myself in the classroom. I thought about whether I should go back to the computer lab or not, but I figured that I shouldn't. I didn't have keys with me or anything, and they might lock the doors. Plus, I wouldn't be able to lock this classroom if I left it. So instead, I walked up to the front of the room, locked the door from the inside, and then turned out the lights. I knew to do those things from the drills we had had. I was wondering, obviously, what the lockdown was for, and I really had no idea. I sat back down at the desk and waited. I texted some friends, but nobody seemed to know what was happening. After about 10 minutes, I got kind of bored, so I moved to a desk in the back because there was a small lamp there. That way, I could keep working without turning all the lights on. So I moved back there and continued grading assignments. This went on for about another 10 minutes or so. It was very quiet with nobody else around and nothing going on. Out of nowhere, I heard somebody try opening the classroom door. It was quiet, but it made me stop what I was doing. At first, I thought that I was just imagining it because everything was so silent. I listened to hear if it would happen again. At first, there was nothing. Then, maybe 30 seconds later, I heard it again. Then again, somebody was now trying to open the door over and over, but it was locked. This went on for a good 30 seconds to a minute. I was too creeped out to get up and see who was there. The sounds eventually stopped, and things were quiet for another 30 seconds or so. I was about to get up, but then I heard a quiet knocking on the classroom door. It was a very soft knock, and it creeped me out even more. They only knocked once, though. I thought there was a chance that maybe it was the teacher or a student from the class, but I didn't know why they would be out in the hallway at that time. I walked over to the door and moved the shade to look out the small window. I saw no one. Then I actually unlocked and opened the classroom door to look out into the hallway. When I did, nobody was there. I went back into the classroom and locked the door again. Then I sat back down and continued grading papers. There were no more knocks or noises, but I was really creeped out for the rest of the time. The lockdown ended up lasting another 30 minutes or so, and then it was over. The class returned from the computer lab, and I went on with the rest of the school day. I tried to figure out what the lockdown was for, but I never got a clear answer from anyone. Everyone I asked either didn't know or said different things, so I can't confirm what was actually going on. I still don't know who it was trying to enter the room, whether it was the person who caused the lockdown or just another student or someone else entirely. Either way, it was really creepy. This is the story of something that happened back when I was in high school. It was during my junior year, and I remember hearing that we were going to have a substitute for fifth hour, which was the last class of the day. When I found out, I had the idea to skip class. I wasn't usually someone who skipped classes, and looking back, I definitely shouldn't have done it. But every now and then, I might skip a class I didn't like, especially if it was the last one of the day. Plus, I knew that substitutes would often just take attendance and hand out a random assignment, so we probably wouldn't be doing anything important like a test. My plan was to leave my fourth hour class, grab my stuff from my locker, and walk out the school doors during passing time. However, I failed to execute my plan properly. I got lazy, and when I got to the locker commons, I ended up talking to my friend for too long. When the warning bell rang, I barely noticed it. I was caught up in conversation, and the hallways quickly cleared out. My friend left for his class, and I was left behind. I quickly gathered my things from my locker and went to leave, but by that point, almost everyone was gone. I was still going to head for the doors, but then I saw one of the hall monitors coming down the stairs right next to the exit. I had to move away quickly. I went down a different hallway, annoyed with myself for missing my chance. Now I had to find another way out while avoiding hall monitors. At that point, I couldn't go to class either. I'd already be late, and I was too committed to the plan. As I walked down another hallway and turned a corner, I suddenly heard footsteps behind me. I assumed it was another hall monitor, maybe even the same one. I started walking faster, but the footsteps sped up too. At that moment, I knew they had seen me. They came around the corner and entered the same hallway I was in. They were still a good distance behind me, but definitely following. For a few seconds, I thought I was about to get yelled at, but they didn't say anything. I didn't dare look back. After a few seconds, I turned another corner and got out of their line of sight. I picked up my pace even more. At that point, I was just trying to get away. I headed toward the opposite end of the school, eventually passing through the cafeteria. I stayed along the edge where people would normally be, but since class had started, it was mostly empty. That path led to a quieter hallway near the Performing Arts Center, what we called the PASC. The hallway was carpeted, so my footsteps were quieter, but it also meant I couldn't hear whoever might have been behind me. I still didn't look back. I reached the doors to the PAC and tried to go inside, hoping to hide there since it was dark and had plenty of places to stay out of sight. But the doors were locked, so I moved along the hallway and turned a corner. I wasn't hearing footsteps anymore, but I didn't want to take any chances. Then I noticed a random door near the PEC. I tried it, and it opened. Inside was a small, dark room, probably a storage closet. The lights were off, and it was pitch black. I couldn't see much, but I could tell it was a tight space. I didn't dare turn on the light. I just went inside and stayed completely still. About 30 seconds later, I heard someone walking past outside. Then everything went quiet for about 5 minutes. I thought about leaving, but decided it was too risky, so I stayed put. Then I heard an announcement over the intercom. I couldn't make it out clearly from where I was hiding, but I distinctly heard the word lockdown. That made everything feel a lot more serious. I stayed there, completely silent, for about 30 minutes. No one came by and I didn't hear anything else. Eventually, another announcement came on, saying the lockdown was over. Not long after that, the bell rang, signaling the end of the school day. Only then did I quietly step out, go to my locker, grab my things, and finally leave to go home. Later, I found out that there had been a suspicious man in the school. I've always thought that it might have been the same person who was following me in the hallway. The lesson I learned from that day was simple: never skip class. Many years ago, when I was in high school, I have a memory that stands out as being rather creepy. I think I was a sophomore at the time, so I was still pretty young. We had this gym class where we would play all kinds of games. We played dodgeball quite a bit, and we would meet in the gym. One day, I'm not sure if it was before class or at the end of class. Many students were just wandering around the gym and talking. We were either waiting for class to start or for the bell to ring so we could be dismissed. Anyway, I was with one of my friends at the time, whose name was Josh. We were pretty good friends, and we would talk all the time in class. Both of us were just wandering around the gym and talking. I'm not really sure why, but we ended up near a back corner by the bleachers in the main gym. It was used for basketball games, so they had pull-out bleachers on a few sides. They were pushed back against the wall, but they still took up some space. There was this area where, whether the bleachers were pulled out or pushed back, you could still walk underneath them. It was kind of like a narrow walkway, although that wasn't really its purpose. Trash would often get stuck back there, and it was hard to see inside. Nobody really ever went over there, and I personally had never been back there before. We weren't planning to go underneath the bleachers, but we happened to walk by the entrance to that space. As I glanced over, I noticed that someone was there. At first, I thought it was just another student, which seemed like the most logical explanation. Josh saw the person as well, and we both stopped to look. The person was just standing there, facing away from us, deeper underneath the bleachers, about halfway in. We watched for a few seconds. The longer I looked, the more I realized it didn't seem like a student. It looked like a grown man. Then he turned and looked at us. It was definitely a man, not a student. He also didn't look like one of the school maintenance workers. I had seen a few of them around before and recognized most of them. This guy wasn't one of them. He wasn't doing any work either. He was just standing there. As soon as he saw us, we both quickly moved away and went back to where the rest of the class was. The man never came out from under the bleachers, at least not while we were there. For some reason, we didn't tell anyone, not even the teacher. I'm not sure why. Looking back, I'd say it was just because we were young and didn't think things through. The rest of that class went by without anything notable happening. The next hour, I was in a normal class, English, I think. And during that period, there was suddenly a lockdown. It lasted for quite a while, maybe close to an hour, before it was finally lifted and the school day resumed. Later, I heard that there had been a suspicious man in the school. That's when I realized it was most likely the same person we had seen. I don't know how he got into the building, but apparently he had been hiding under the bleachers in the gym. I'm not sure what his intentions were, but I regret not reporting him to a teacher. I'm just glad that someone else eventually saw him and that the school went into lockdown. He was removed from the building, and things were able to return to normal. Even so, it still creeps me out to think that I came face to face with that man.